Hawaiʻi County residents will have a new mayor after incumbent Harry Kim failed to advance to the general election. When the winner is sworn in, the COVID-19 crisis will not be over. The new mayor will be tasked with keeping residents safe and planning for a long economic recovery. Hear from candidates Ikaika Marzo and Mitch Roth on how they plan to tackle the crisis, as well as other issues facing Hawaiʻi Island. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Election 2020 on Insights on PBS Hawaiʻi start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Daryl Huff. Two first-time mayoral candidates from very different backgrounds are facing off to become Hawaiʻi County's next mayor. They advanced to the general election after receiving the most votes out of a crowded field of 15 candidates, including incumbent Harry Kim. That means there are tens of thousands of votes up for grabs. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. Now to our candidates who are appearing live via the internet. Mitch Roth has been Hawaiʻi County's prosecuting attorney since his election in 2012. He's a graduate of UH Manoa and got his law degree from Whittier Law School. He was also a founding member of the Hawaiʻi Island Visitor Aloha Society and the Community Coalition for Neighborhood Safety. He and his wife have 3 adult children who all graduated from Waiakea High School in Hilo. Ikaika Marzo is a business owner and community organizer who was born and raised on Hawaiʻi Island. He became a social media star with his live videos during the 2018 Kīlauea eruption. During that time, he spearheaded the Pu'uhonua o Puna Relief Center, where residents affected by the lava flow could go for information and supplies. His family lost his childhood home in Kalapana during the eruption of the Kīlauea Volcano in the 1990s. Let me start with you, Ikaika. Out of the blue, all of a sudden you're running for mayor. I mean, what brought on that? How did that happen?
If you asked me 10 years ago, and what's your 10-year list of what do you see yourself being in 10 years? It definitely wasn't being mayor. Going down a road on my journey, within the last couple of years, some of those foreseen futures is changing. And we have a kuleana, a responsibility, and I got the opportunity to put myself in this responsibility seat, and now I'm here. And out of 15 candidates, I'm part of the top 2. So,
were you kind of surprised by that?
Yeah, actually, this is my first time in political, being in politics, and of course, Harry Kim has been someone that I looked up to as a young boy going through the eruption in Kalapana during the 1983 to 91. So he was a role model for myself, and also the previous administration. Cousin of mine, Billy Kinoy, he also was a role model for myself. But I never would think I would be sitting here right before you, Daryl.
Okay, Mitch Roth, you were one of the first candidates to step up and say you were going to challenge the incumbent mayor, which is unusual in and of itself. But what was it that made you decide that you really wanted to run for this office? What was the gap that you saw that you needed to fill?
Well, there's a lot of things that were happening in Hawaiʻi County that I saw a lot of issues, a lot of problems, especially going through the lava and how we made some of our decisions. I actually looked for other people to run because as the prosecuting attorney, there's no term limits. I didn't really see anybody jumping up, and I realized that we need to do something. I love this island. I love the people, and I'm a problem solver, and I saw problems that need to be solved.
Okay, so for both of you, one of the things that was talked about quite a bit about Harry Kim was his trouble, it seemed like, responding rapidly to the rapidly changing events around the COVID-19 event. And then let me start with you, Ikaika. What kind of things needed to happen that didn't happen during this pandemic? And there have been more cases coming in. What do you see the need to do right now?
So, there's a few things that needs to be done, especially our economy right now. We're crashing on Hawaiʻi Island, and we need to revive our economy as quick as possible. Create better policies to keep our local economy, local business people safe during this time. Harry Kim, like I said, he's a mentor. I respect everything that he's done for our community. Nobody has the perfect solution for this COVID-19 problem that we are going through as far as all the islands. But I think we need leadership that will put their feet down and move forward for the people on Hawaii Island. So there's a lot of things that economy, testing our sewage to, people around the whole world in the States. They're testing sewages, wastewater treatment centers to identify the COVID-19 before it hits our island. It's a 1 week grace period. So if we can, there's a lot of things, Daryl. But right now we got to revive our economy.
Mitch, where do you stand? The question is usually thrown out this way. So do you put public safety first or the economy first? Is that a discussion that's being had on the Big Island, or I mean, have you got the virus under control now to the point where you can focus on the economy more?
Well, I think we have to be looking at both. If without your life, you don't have a livelihood. So public health and safety is really important, but also making sure that people have a livelihood, because there's people that are in trouble right now, and that puts them in danger. I think I heard some stats with people having heart attacks, depression, a lot of these other issues. So we need to make sure that we're looking at both of these things and making sure that we're able to recover and get people back to work, but do it in a safe manner.
Do you feel like, Mitch, enough is being done right now to keep people safe, or do you need to be more strict? Like Kauai still has very strict regulations. Do you feel like you need to reduce people's movements more, or do anything more than what's being doing now?
I'm not really sure if it's so much reducing people's movements, but I think what it is we need to get people working together, because this is something that we all are into right now. We need to work as a team, work as a community to prevent this spread.
Ikaika, how about you? Do you feel like right now it's time to lighten things up, or do things still need to be clamped down?
I think, the road that we're on right now I'm perfectly fine with not shutting down our economy on Hawaii Island, not shutting down the island, because once we shut down, we're going to lose a lot of our local economy. If I walk into Hilo Town itself, almost 90% of the businesses is out of business. We got to make sure we can protect our business people around our whole island. But still put your foot down, create better policies, instead of reactive, proactive. Before it hits, get policies, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, all in place. So if something happens in Ka'u, Kohala, Waimea, Honaka, Kona, Puna, we're ready to isolate and contain the pandemic or a virus within the community.
Do you guys feel like the resources, there's a big controversy over here in the Hawaii State Capitol about the response of the health department, particularly on the contact tracing issues. Do you feel like the health infrastructure is there on the island? I mean, or do you need more help from the state government? Let's start with you, Mitch Roth.
I think we really do need more help from the state government. I think everybody needs more help, more PPE, and right now we have a decent amount at our hospitals, but we have to be, like I said, proactive rather than reactive. One of the things that concerns me is in talking to some people in our county government, asking about recovery plans. I didn't see anything. So what I've started to do is I've started to reach out to the chambers of commerce, our business community, and some others to start putting together a plan. And so we're listening to people. We need to do the same thing with our medical community. We need to work together with them, give them a voice, and actually listen to them to help solve some of these problems.
Ikaika Marzo, how do you feel about the support you're getting from the state?
So, if I look at the state, we haven't been getting a lot of support within our community and the county of Hawaii. So with that being said, we got to start to help ourselves. If we can't get the support from the state, we got to look at each other and how we can protect our kupuna and our keikis within our community.
Can I ask?
Sometimes I don't want to be waiting for any more help, or because we're gonna keep on waiting and waiting and waiting. By that time, this virus could multiply. So we gotta start helping ourselves with our community, kupunas, keikis, economy, our business, local business people on this island, and we gotta look at us first.
In that regard, do you guys feel like, given the virus load on the Big Island is it's in an uptick, but it's still not nearly as bad as it is on Oahu? Do you guys feel like, for example, the schools should be having kids back on campus now, or do you feel like you agree that the distance learning is still what should be going on for quite some more time? Ikaika, why don't you go first on that one?
Distance learning. This pandemic's been going on in the state of Hawaii for over 5 months. We should have come up with plans already for our keiki. But if we look at the 1918 Spanish flu, a lot of our learning centers and our educational departments would start with outdoor learning centers where we could go out, in the open. Even back in 1918, these outdoor learning centers was in the freezing cold, but they got it done. So that's something that we should look at. I think we should go back to our school systems and also work with the DOE to create better policies to keep our keiki safe.
Mitch Roth, how do you feel about that?
I've been talking to a lot of teachers and people that work at the schools, and there's a lot of fear right now. And, part of that fear is, what kind of plans that the Department of Education has put into place. It's interesting that there's teachers that are distance learning, but they can't do their lessons from their homes. Mm-hmm. They have children. And, one of the big issues that everybody's having is people have children that are at home, and, your parents have to go places. So I think there's some real opportunities here to improve our technological infrastructure, for not only for our schools, but for telemedicine, for working. But as far as the schools, I think we need to have some better plans over there.
So let me, last question on COVID, because frankly, I'm getting some questions in and no one's asking about COVID, so I'll just do one more. In terms of reopening the economy, there's been talked about these resort bubbles on the Big Island. Particularly, you have a lot of self-contained resorts. Also talk about, gradually increasing, opening businesses, restaurants, and so on. What do you think is the first one or two things that should happen right away to try and get the economy going again? I know that's a big issue for you, Ikaika Marzo.
So, we have 5, but I'll say the first 2. Building department. Right now, construction has a short-term policy right now. As for our plan, our construction has not faltered, has not taken a dip. It's continuing to keep our families afloat. If we look at a family household, father is in the construction business, mother is in tourism business. So that father is holding that family afloat right now. So streamline the permitting processes for residential and commercial properties and projects. The second thing was, we cannot go back to tourism. So next thing is CIP projects, shovel-ready projects within the county. Push that forward, make that happen, so our construction workers can continue to work and provide financial stability for their family. I gotta say this: I'm not against. I'm all for construction, but with reasonable construction where environmental and cultural impacts is well thought out. So,
okay,
that's the 2 things that I'll do.
Mitch Roth, your own feeling. Okay, I think that people generally that's a pretty standard plan. Get construction going, shovel-ready projects, and so on. Beyond that, what would you suggest?
One of the things we're talking about, I think tourism will eventually come back. I don't know, this is an opportunity to rethink tourism. But one of the things that's happening, my daughter, for example, was here for the last 5 months. She went back to New York, and she had to quarantine for 14 days because Hawaii is a hot spot. 3 days in, they called her and they told her that if she tests negative, that she can come off of quarantine. She went down, she got her test. 30 minutes later, she tested negative. I'm wondering why we're not doing that, why we're not testing people before they get here, and then maybe do a secondary test to, test them to make sure that they're negative. And that gives us the opportunities to look at things like tourism. The other thing we have to do is we need to make sure that people are working so that they can put food on their plates. And one of the things I've been talking about is changing the philosophy of government to a government that helps people, businesses thrive and succeed versus permitting them to exist. And Ikaika mentioned the building department. It's more than just the building department that we need to make changes in our permitting process. In talking to people in agriculture and business, in construction, people tell you that's one of the biggest issues, the length of time it takes, the uncertainty in the rules that there is. And so we need to make sure, for example, when you're building a house, that there's a time limit for the process to go through. As a prosecutor, if I charge a murder case, I have a time limit. It shouldn't be more difficult to build a house than it is to prosecute a murder case. Same permitting process. You bring your permit in and they tell you to make changes A, B, and C. You make changes A, B, and C, you come back for that house and they're telling you you need to make changes D, E, and F. And you can go through the whole alphabet. The length of time that takes, is preventing people from working. I believe we should have a one bite of the apple rule for when you're building houses. When they're looking at the permits and they're telling you to make changes, they should give you specifics in the law of what you need to change.
Okay.
It shouldn't be a guessing game. If you do these things, you help businesses get back to work. If businesses are getting back to work, they're employing people. When you're employing people, they're putting food on their table, and there's some degree of security. We need to make sure we're doing this, but we need to do it in a safe manner.
Okay, good. I'm going to move on now because I've got two questions here about you guys have a lot of hot button issues on that island, I got to tell you. So Tom from Waikiki, in regards to Mauna Kea, how would you respond differently from Mayor Kim? What are the candidates' views on progressing to TMT? That's Mark from Waikoloa. Ikaika Marzo, I'm sure you get this question all the time.
Yes, and we're gonna professionally, just to have everyone. I'm not against. I'm pro business, but I'm pro Mauna also. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Basic. County government don't have no jurisdiction on Mauna Kea. So, Harry Kim answered, he got thrown on a bus, and it's not his jurisdiction to make any decision. He was put in the middle to mediate and start, well, not technically start, but try to start the project with his influence. So again, we gotta talk about this. County government don't have any jurisdiction on that mountain. And I think Brother Mitch can agree with that.
But let me just ask directly, Ikaika,
Yes.
If that's so, then if the state goes ahead and goes to build it, would you put any roadblocks up against it or try and prevent it?
So again, county don't have any jurisdiction. And if they do, they're going to have to figure out who's the ownership of that road. Is it DOT or Department of Hawaiian Homelands? Did that transfer complete? Was it complete or was it under the table? Is that still a problem with moving on? Because if you think about it and get down to the actual root of the problem, the beneficiaries had the right to be on that road because the property and the road and that property didn't get transferred over to DOT.
Okay, I'll try one more time. Okay, so
I know what you're trying to get to. Yeah.
Okay, so if Harry Kim was put in a position where he was trying to mediate, but he had publicly stated he was in favor of the telescope going up there. That may have made it more difficult for him to mediate. You don't see a role for the county, but again, if the state goes ahead and wants to build it, would you let that happen? It
all depends on the state. Again, it's not my decision to make. at the bottom of the table. It's not my decision to make. My tax, the people on this Hawaii Island pay their tax dollars for me to take care of county business, not state business, not federal business, but county business. And, you know, if I had the choice, I think the first thing that I would want to do is to have the executive order and executive decision over the mountain. Then we can move forward. Then the county has the jurisdiction to make those decisions, whether if TMT is built or not. And what we'll do is, what I was thinking, what we had planned was, you know, every district have representatives, kupuna, people that for the Mauna, for the build of the telescope and against it. And everyone come together, work collaboratively to come up with the best plan, the management plan of Mauna Kea. Because we all can agree, the management on Mauna Kea is not the greatest. You know, we have 13 telescopes up there. A few are not being used. We should be taking down these telescopes and honoring the plan that was set forth in 1965.
Okay, thanks, Ikaika. Mitch Roth, last answer on that one. Where would you stand on it?
Well, you know, I actually think that TMT represents educational and economic opportunities. That being said, you know, people say, well, are you going to enforce the law? And my question is what could the mayor do? You know, and Ikaika's right. It's state land, state agencies that are running the mountain. It's state agencies that are actually doing the enforcement. I also understand that, you know, for over 50 years, there's been questions by many in the Native Hawaiian community about stewardship of that land. There's some things that we need to address. You know, one of the things, there's iwis and ahus, you know, that were taken down and, you know, those represent families that those things haven't really been addressed. Your question really gets to this question. What is it that the mayor can do? And I think the role of the mayor is to bring people together, to listen to them, to give people a real voice and see how we can move forward, either forward with building or forward, you know, in another way. We need leadership there. And, you know, I think, you know, there's a lot of people that believe that if you don't build, that's all of business. There's a lot of people that believe that it's desecration. And so people have not been able to find common ground. I think we need to start finding common ground for not only this issue, but for other issues. And I can give you one piece of common ground that, you know, whether you're for TMT, whether you're against TMT, whether you don't even care about TMT, but you have kids here, everybody can agree that if you have kids, you want to have your kids, you want your kids to have the ability to raise their kids on this island. Because this is a great place to live, a great place. I think that's where you start finding common ground and you start bringing people together, talking about real issues, not demonizing people because they believe that you know, the TMT should be built or not be built. We need to start coming together as a community, as a county, as a state, as a nation. And, you know, we talked a little bit about this beforehand. One of the things I enjoy about this race is Ikaika and I are actually friends, and we can agree to disagree, but we can have conversations to move the ball forward. And I think that's really important. I think it's a great thing that, you know, the rest of the state and the rest of the country should look at.
Okay.
How we're running races.
I appreciate that very much, but I'm going to do my best to divide you as much as I can with these questions. Okay? That's my job. So there are two questions about energy moving forward. One, thoughts on geothermal energy, and also Dan from Hawaiʻi Island wants to know where you stand on the biomass project at the Hamakua Coast, Honua Ola Bioenergy, formerly known as Honua. Where do you go with alternative energy on the Big Island? You've got that huge power plant I guess it was a sugar mill before, right? And it got converted into a power plant, but it's basically been shot down at this point by the PUC. Do you feel as mayor you would have a role in trying to either get that plant going or just move on and move to other sources of alternative energy? Ikaika, why don't you start with that one?
You know, alternative energy right now, Hunuaʻola is firm power. We have all different types of source of power on Hawaii Island, whether it's solar, wind, hydro, but all those sources of power is not firm power. Uh, but so I ended up going and taking a tour of the plant and really get into the nitty gritty of how the plant works. And for a county leader, is that how the county can benefit from this plant. Can we turn this plant into a waste to energy plant? Because we have a major problem on Hawaii Island with our waste. We continue to bury our waste all over our island. And right now we're at Pu'uanahulu, and our life expectancy of our landfill is diminishing because of our recycling programs. But, so I ended up taking a tour of the plant. It's way ahead of its time. It's the technology is just advanced, but I still want to talk story with the people that have concerns within the community. Talking to people that are in Pepekeo, Papaiko, Honomu, Hakalau, all those people, because they're going to see the long-term effects. Okay. And at the bottom line is the safety and well-being of our people is the number one concern and the number one priority of being the leader of this island. As far as PGV after the lava flow, there should have been an EIS statement. It's a different terrain. Everything's different because of the lava, the intrusion and all the different fissures around. There should have been an EIS statement to start up that plant. There was none.
Okay, Mitch Roth, let me move.
Yeah,
I kind of got to move along a little bit, just because I got a lot of questions here. Mitch, start with geothermal and then talk a little bit about Huhonua and other ideas you have for alternative energy development.
Well, Hawaii has to be off of fossil fuel by 2045. And that is the goal. And so we need to look at alternative energy like a stock portfolio. Not put everything in one basket. We have the opportunity for geothermal, biomass, whether that be waste to energy. We have, wind power, solar power. There's a whole bunch of different ideas that we need to really explore. I think that geothermal gives us some really interesting opportunities to create hydrogen, which can be used for buses and other transportation. That's a pretty much a freer energy than the way hydrogen is made in other places. Those things, whether it's Huhonua or it is PGV, those are decisions made by the PUC on the state side, not so much on the county side. Huhonua, I've taken the tour as well, and I've listened to the community, and the community has some really good concerns, but Huhonua has some things there that are really worth thinking about. One of the things that really got my attention is that Huhonua, that if they're burning, if they're making biomass from the trees that were planted, so it's not really a deforestation, they're gonna replant those trees, we could reduce our intake of black oil being burnt at Helco by about 250,000 barrels a year. That's a lot of money that leaves our state going out. I think Ikaika is right. The technology that they're using is a cleaner technology than what Helco is actually putting out through their smokestacks. And I'm still reviewing these things, so I'm going to be meeting with Helco to confirm some of the things that I've been reading. But there's some other big concerns that the community has, as far as the amount of trucks on the highways and stuff like that. And then you have jobs. And right now we have a lot of people that are having a hard time feeding their families. And so it's not a, yay for every idea, because we have to look at our environment and we have to make sure that we're taking care of our environment. And, right now it may be a cleaner route than what we're using as part of our portfolio. But again, those are going to be decisions made by the state PUC and not the mayor.
Let me ask, this is an interesting question, because I'm not that familiar with it. You both mentioned a little bit about the recycling or waste problem. Question is, there's no recycling on the Big Island. What are each candidate's plans for that? What is the issue of waste management on the Big Island? And is it recycling, or is it you need to you've got a landfill problem, or is it both?
So our landfill in Hilo, we knew 20 years ago that landfill needed to be closed down, and we really failed to come up with a viable plan. Right now, we are hauling rubbish from Hilo to the Kona side, Waikoloa, which is expensive. When they looked at these plans, it was they looked at it kind of short-sighted and felt it was going to be a cheaper plan. But I think there's some really big problems. One is the cost of gas, the wear and tear on our infrastructure that is badly in need of repair, the safety issues. We've had a couple of trucks that have gone over Saddle Road and have actually crashed, and we've already had a death, not from our landfill. So those are some issues. Then, with recycling, our big market that was buying our recycled goods, China stopped buying our goods. And so that causes, some big issues. Now, I'm going to say something, and Ikaika's probably going to laugh, and a lot of people are going to say, what the heck is he talking about? But I don't know if you know this, Daryl, Hawaii, we have one of the best recycling programs in the country. Not for the county, though. At PTA, the recycling program was one of the best military base. I think it won the best military base for recycling in the country. And they have different ways of dealing with the situation. They have reuse programs. They have recycling programs. They have digesters up there. And so about 60 to 70% of everything that goes on the Waikoloa base, the PTA base, gets recycled or reused, which is really fantastic. There's some great lessons that we can be learning there.
Okay.
As I look at, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to give Ikaika a chance to talk a little bit about waste disposal. Go ahead.
It's a major problem that we have right now in our county, and some of the issues that obviously I'm going to have to agree with Mitch with everything that he said, but some of the things that we came up with planning with how we can manage this problem. There's a lot of appliances coming over on these ships and these barges, and those barges are going back without containers. If we buy it here, I think we should dispose, the people that sell the products to us on island should also take the products back with them back to where it came from. That's one of the solutions that we had within our team. Also, recycling. We have a few positions within the environmental management where our positions are basically, that's all they do is look for areas where we can intake recyclables, or not only China, but Taiwan, South Korea, all these different countries, and work out contracts where they can continue to take our recyclables. Because if we don't go into the recyclable and start recycling our cans, bottles, and whatnot, our life expectancy of our Pu'uana landfill will decrease, by 50%. So if we can, it's about the life expectancy, and if we can have a longer life of our landfill, we can come up with better ideas, innovative ideas, with technology advancing every year. Waste to energy is getting, in the last 10 years, has improved over 500 to 600% of being safer, cleaner, greener. If we look at a couple of the countries, as far as Switzerland and all those different countries that are doing waste to energy, clean and green.
Okay, good.
And those are the type of countries that we gotta adopt those systems.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you, but I need to kick.
No problem.
I've got piles of questions over here.
Just one.
Good question from Maria. What with the loss of GE and TAT tax collection from tourism, how does each candidate plan to deal with a lack of revenue? Can we expect to see cuts in department funding or increases in property taxes? Mitch, why don't you start?
I think for too long we've been raising our taxes as the only solution to our problems. We need to look at other things. And I talked about it before. If we change the philosophy of government to a government that helps people thrive and succeed, we can have businesses that are actually hiring people. And right now, one of the problems is if you're a business and you have to go through our permitting process, you're not sure how long it's going to take. You're not sure if you follow all the rules, if you're even going to get permitted. So, we need to put a sign up saying we're open for business and do so in a, culturally appropriate way. We need to look at other opportunities. As you go and talk to people in the county, there are places where we need to make cuts, but we need to talk to people at all levels of the county and get their input. I was talking at a union interview, and I brought this up, and this one lady said, "Wait, you're going to come and talk to me as the mayor? I've been in this department for 12 years, and the directors never talked to me." And then she went on to say that, I can tell you that they buy us stuff that we don't need. They schedule people when we don't need them. They don't schedule people when we do need them. So if you're talking to people, there's the ability of making some, good cuts as well. The other thing we need to look at is we need to make sure that we're getting all of our grant funding. I've talked to people on other islands that have told us that our county has left millions of dollars of earmarked grant money on the table because we didn't have grant writers to do the work. We need to probably hire a cadre of grant writers to make sure that we're getting the earmarked funds, but also going after the competitive funds. As the prosecuting attorney, we've done that in our office. My office budget's $11 million. About $3 million of that comes through earmarked state and federal grants and competitive grant funds that we've actually written for and gone after. Not that we have grant writers, we have people in our office that have helped write those grants and been really proactive rather than reactive. And we need to create positions in the county that are able to do that.
So I did this to Ikaika, so I'm going to do it to you too. So are you saying that you can actually manage this budget without increasing taxes?
Oh,
No, I'm going to let Mitch, can you answer that question?
yeah.
I believe we can. We may have to do things like starting off by doing a hiring freeze. Our county budget has grown exponentially in the last 12 years. And, we need to look at other ways than just raising taxes. If you talk to people, we go around talking to people all over the place, and they're having a hard time getting by, and the county's just taxing them to death.
Okay,
We
good.
need to work.
Thanks. Ikaika, your turn. How do you see balancing a budget when you've got significant revenue problems ahead?
Yeah. So, I'm a business owner. Been a business owner for 10 years, been a successful business owner. Everything that I did with tourism, commercial fishing, cattle ranching, was all because of budgeting. Budget how we move forward with my business. First thing that I'm going to go in there, if we got to manage the budget and balance the budget, we're going to have to audit every department, control the spending within the different departments, control and stop foolish spending within these different departments. Fund balance, that's a good term that I just learned from some of my financial advisors within our campaign. Fund balance, roll over money saved from foolish spending. There's a lot of spending within a county that we don't need. We don't need these spending. Freeze any county hiring. And obviously the services, we will also have to cut services to balance out the budget. And also, we cannot be raising taxes at all. And this is what a lot of the union people don't want to hear. And it's the monkey in the room. We're probably going to have to furlough some of our county workers just to balance the budget. A lot of our 2% land fund, I'm for the 2% land fund, open space land fund, but our county government cannot be buying any open space property right now because we're going to have to figure out how we can keep the revenue within our county government. If we buy 2%, if you buy property from the 2% land fund, we take away that revenue that we could have to balance out the budget.
Okay.
And the last thing is, if we're going to furlough people, I think what we want to do and want to show as leadership is that our leadership, myself and the cabinet and my department heads and deputies, we take the first budget cut. We take it.
Okay, good.
We lead by leadership.
I'm going to stop you because I still got more questions. Got a couple of questions that are kind of specific to each candidate, and I'll let you both weigh in. But for Mitch Roth, Native Hawaiians are disproportionately represented in our state's criminal justice system. Their issues begin in the juvenile justice system. What are your thoughts about what's happening I assume as a prosecutor? What have you done? What can you do as mayor to deal with the difficulties of disproportionate representation of Native Hawaiians in the criminal justice system?
This is true that the Native Hawaiians have a disproportionate representation in our criminal justice system, but they also have a disproportionate representation in a lot of the other negative social categories, whether it be CPS, whether it be in treatment, whether it be in other things. And, this is really a shame because if you think back 150 years ago, Hawaiians were some of had one of the most sophisticated constitutions, one of the most literate people in the world, almost 99% literacy. If you think about the values of Imi Loa, we have the Imi Loa Astronomy Center. Imi Loa is a seeker of knowledge. And so you ask what was taken away. And so there's a lot of things that were taken away that has caused a lot of this trauma. The language was taken away. There's land issues that were taken away. I think one of the things that's happened, I think one of the greatest things that's happened, and it's not really a county thing, but it's our immersion charter schools where kids are learning the language and bringing back and understanding and appreciating, who they are and where they come from. There's a whole bunch of things. We talked about TMT that, there's trauma there that we have never as a county really, or state, come to grips with and have those conversations. Okay. Some of the things that we've been doing in the criminal justice system, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening. Throughout the state, we have something called Camp Agape. We've been very active with that. Camp Agape is a camp for kids whose parents are incarcerated, put on mostly by the churches.
Okay, I'm gonna say thanks because okay. if I don't stop you guys, I'm not gonna get to these questions. And so Ikaika, I got a couple of questions here, and this is a little sensitive, but what the heck? So a couple of people are calling and saying that you were a participant in a unmasked event, basically a large funeral. You know what that's about? So, and basically they're saying, does this show well that you have good judgment to be mayor?
Well, I participated. I'm a Native Hawaiian, and my values was always to take care of what was happening. So I got the opportunity to take part of a celebration of life. There was, gathering in the outdoors. It was the limit was at 100, and I didn't take part. I provided my services because this family was going through a tough time. They lost a loved one, and for me, I'm a guy that I love people. I love our lahui, our people of Hawaiʻi Island, and I'm gonna do whatever I possibly can. And I took my boat out and took. 50% of the people was from Hawaiʻi Island and 50% was from Oahu. And we partaked in this ceremony of casting our brother to the next realm. And, I felt good about it. To point fingers to say that we was part of something that, what we see today with COVID-19 cases. There was no restrictions at that time with traveling quarantine, 14-day quarantine restrictions, and furthermore. So yes, I was part of it, and I was proud of it, and I'm going to man up to it because my na'au and my heart was for the family, and that's what I did.
Okay, I appreciate that. As well said. Mitch Roth, do you have any comment about that at all? I mean, I think there was a lot of talk about it, but you're right that there were less limits on outdoor activities and so on. I think that the whole community may have learned a lesson from that. Mitch?
yeah, I think everybody's trying to do their best right now to be safe, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I'm going to move on then. Okay, so short-term vacation rental, that's a big issue on the Big Island. As I recall, a lot of the properties that were destroyed by a lava, there was a lot of short-term rental properties in that batch. Is this an issue you guys have got to take on? And do you see allowing a significant number, because you've got those people that spend money in the economy? Rich, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, so short-term vacation rentals is a big issue, partly because of the rules that were put into place, and I think those laws need to be drastically changed. As I've gone through the laws, I can argue either side of the for or against. The law is just poorly written. And give you one example. I think inside the law, you have to give notice to neighbors in a certain circumstance, and they give them an opportunity to say something. There's nothing in the law that says if every one of those neighbors is against it, that the planning director can turn it down. That's kind of crazy. We had an interpretation earlier this year from our planning director, says if you take your one hat, you can't take off one hat and put on another hat. In reading the law, what the law says, if you permanently give it up, then you have to let the planning department know. And permanently, if you look at the definition of that word, it means like forever. But if you want to use for the best use and enjoyment of your land, it may be renting it out to somebody for a period of time and then going back to using it as a short-term vacation rental. So that's one of the things that's happening is that we have interpretations that really are really not in the black and white letter of the law. So we need to make some big changes to that law. In some places are
just to get straight though, so you're saying that some level of short-term vacation rentals are okay. You just need to make sure know where they are and regulate them. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, Ikaika Marzo, what are your feeling about short-term vacation rentals?
I'm going to have to agree with Mitch. If you look at how much short-term vacation rentals on Hawaiʻi Island, there was over 8,000 short-term vacation rentals on Hawaiʻi Island. And a lot of them was owned by people from the mainland. Yes, they're creating jobs, but there was no connection to the community, to their neighbors. They didn't care about anything what was going on within their neighborhood that they bought their property on. But again, they created jobs, but I'm going to have to agree with Mitch. The law was written pretty poorly. But I have to commend Harry Kim he started this 3 years ago, and he worked hard to making sure that our people on Hawaiʻi Island was protected, and he started the ball rolling. So now it's time for the next mayor to continue on.
Ikaika, you kind of cut your teeth and got quite famous statewide during the last volcanic eruption, and we were talking about that before the show. But I'd like to ask both of you guys, what's the unfinished business now remaining for the county from the lava disaster, and what are the things that need to happen right away in order to fix that? Ikaika, why don't you go first?
So I think some of the things that we are looking at within the lava recovery, there's a lot of people still not getting those funding from FEMA. Also, there's a lot of roads that needs to be put in. We have Kapoho, the road to Kapoho, Pohoiki. We still have Leilani Estates. There's a lot of things that should be done. One of the things that should be done was Pohoiki Road. We have the private sector company there ready to go. We just need the okay from our county government. And also there's the buyout. A lot of people are in limbo right now because their property is not accessible right now. They can't get back home. They don't have any funds, loss of jobs because of our economy taking a big dive. So, that's some of the things that we need to look at right now.
Okay, Mitch Roth.
And Kaika said on some things, in my talks, and I've done a lot of talks out in that community, what the community has told me through many of those talks are infrastructure, the roads, like Ikaika has said, a community center, whether town center, shopping, whether it's the boat ramps and things like that. Very few people have talked to me about, wanting a buyout. And one of the things that's really interesting is we just went through this grant process. The grant process asked for community input. And I think the community felt that they gave input and they really weren't heard, because the funds are primarily going to a buyout that, will benefit some, but a lot of those people there have houses that, that aren't buried under, but they need roads to get out to them. Roads is a huge issue for a lot of those people down there. And, there's funds that should have been put to that.
Another question that we actually had before the show: when we're having the all mail election issue going on, how is that operating on the Big Island? You guys have got a lot more territory to deal with. Were there problems with that in the primary, or do you feel pretty comfortable going into the general about how that's going to be handled? That is a county function for the most part. Mitch, why don't you start?
I think it worked relatively well. There's always issues to look at. We had the highest voting percentage in many years, as did the rest of the state. So the fact that we got a lot more people voting, I think, is a really, really good thing. But as you know, many people got 2 ballots. And I understand that the way they were going to count them, only one of those ballots would have counted. I have heard from many people that their ballot wasn't counted, and so that's a concern.
How do they know?
One of the interesting.
How do they know if their ballot was counted or not?
So the Office of Elections actually had a site that you can go on to see if your ballot was received, and if your ballot was received, you got a little mark that you could put on your Facebook page or on your social media, and so. I was able to see that mine was counted, and I was pretty happy with that. But people were going on, and I had several people tell me that their ballot wasn't counted. I had people tell me that their ballot was returned to them. So it is possible that we could have even had a higher turnout, but for some of these things. But all in all, the fact that we had more people turn out, a bigger voice, I think that's great, because it's really important that the public feel that they're part of this. Okay. And I got an interesting story on that.
I got to give Ikaika a chance, because I only get down to a couple more minutes. Go ahead. On the voting, are you comfortable and feel it's a well-run system?
On this beautiful island of 186,738 people, on a square mile of 4,028 square miles on Hawaiʻi Island, we had the most voter turnout ever in history. We have over 120,000 registered voters, but we had over 60,000 voters. So, I think it's a good thing, but there was a lot of new voters. And, there was a process where there was a mail, the first mail came in, and it was their signature verification. And you send that in, and you get your ballot about a month or a month and a half away or a month away. So if you didn't send in the first signature verification letter, your vote would have been voided.
I have to stop you, because I have only one question to go, and I've only got about a minute. So I need each of you guys to show me your discipline as a candidate here and answer this question in one sentence, okay? You've had hurricanes, you've had lava flows, you've got COVID. Harry Kim did the best he could, I think, but he had how many heart attacks? What personal quality do you have that is going to enable you to deal with the kind of crises that are so frequent on the Big Island? Ikaika Marzo, you first. Your personal quality in one sentence.
One thing: aloha for the people and communication. You got to communicate with everyone on Hawaiʻi Island and what's going on with every district on Hawaiʻi Island. Communicate and have the aloha spirit to get out there and connect with these people.
That was pretty good. Okay, Mitch.
I have the experience in running offices and coming up with innovative plans and actually putting them into action. And I've done that several times and look forward to doing that in the future.
Okay, very good. You guys showed me something with that last couple of answers, and I appreciate it. Okay, and mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight, and we thank our guests, the two men running for Hawaiʻi County Mayor, Mitch Roth and Ikaika Marzo. Really enjoyed the show with you guys tonight. Next week on Insights, the two candidates who advanced to the general election in the race for Honolulu prosecutor. We'll hear from Steve Alm and Megan Cow. Please join us then. I'm Daryl Huff for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Aloha.